Great talks this morning. I want to just dive right in. Neil, from your perspective, I'd love to get your sense as to how AI is changing the worlds of energy, biotech, and robotics.
Well, for energy, we're seeing AI fuel the development of smart grids and next generation smart grids that are a lot smarter than the ones that we have today. In biotech or synthetic biology, we see that a lot of the technologies that people consider biotechnologies really came out of the AI world, including pattern matching sequencing technologies, and certainly the technologies that allow us to correlate the sequence of a tumor with drugs that are available. Sometimes those drugs have not passed to be approved by the FDA, but a small percentage of the patients in a clinical trial would have done very well with a given disease or tumor. And then in the world of robotics, we see AI used for collision avoidance and next generation planning so that it's a lot easier to get robots to do what you want them to do and not have to program them in detail.
In the election context, I'm going to simplify the US election and call it the angry white guy election, because they're either looking at Donald or perhaps at Bernie. If you're all right, what are all of these people going to do for jobs for next year or in the next 5 years? Like when you look at the future and all of those people in the past that did a lot of the tasks that will now be singularity fixing, what are they going to do in the future?
Well, I think we're going to see a lot of people disrupted in the labor market, and those people are going to have available to them what amounts to high-quality free education, and hopefully in the not-too-distant future, high-quality free counseling and psychological services, and access to amazing technologies that they can build their quality of life with, like 3D printing and high-quality healthcare and high-quality services and education. And I think they will be able to put together a high quality of life, especially if we build in some mechanisms like a guaranteed annual income. That'll come later.
Let me just follow up on that, because Ramez and maybe Rob, any one of you, this is a question I think that's on everybody's mind. What do we do in the event that we do have more technological unemployment? Can we turn the world, Ramez, for example, into people who are happy just sitting around thinking around and interacting and enjoying life? Is that a realistic goal for people at this point? And is it actually within reach? Is there some kind of utopian ideal that we're talking about?
I think something we don't talk about enough is bringing down the cost of living. And so if energy gets cheaper, if it's cheaper to manufacture things, if it's cheaper to build homes, that's a good thing. But I'm an optimist about jobs, actually. I'd recommend a book, The Second Machine Age by Andy McAfee and Eric Olson. And they're very mixed, but they talk about a lot of jobs that we don't really have a solution for with robotics right now. And a lot of them are sort of high EQ jobs, high emotion jobs, high service jobs, or jobs where we as consumers want a degree of service. And I think there's a bright future.
Yeah, and I would actually suggest there's a fundamental different mindset, and this is a big part of what we talk about. It's shifting from a scarcity model to an abundance model. If in 19 years, if you look at Ramez's curves, we have an abundance of energy, more energy we can deal with. That means transportation's cheap and food is cheap and a lot of other stuff gets easier. In 5 to 10 years, which you're going to hear from, I'm scooping Brad here a little bit, with Google Loon and Facebook drones and others, everyone on the planet has access to the internet for free. Everyone on the planet, which means they all have access to the world's greatest education and MIT classes and you name it. This is a world of abundance. It's a totally different opportunity. And in that world, again, we're talking about 20 to 30 years, which means pretty much all of us in this room are going to see that. We have an opportunity to focus on a different set of questions. We don't have to focus on how to survive, which is what jobs are about today. Largely, that was set up tens of thousands of years ago, and we're still stuck in that old mentality. The future, I believe, for humanity is to focus on the big questions. Why are we here? What else is there? To explore outwards and explore inwards, and creativity and social connections. I think that's the long-term, hundreds of years from now, that's what we get to focus on. It's like kind of what Star Trek was all about, right? I think we're building Star Trek in some ways. The next 30 years, however, are the greatest transformation and transition that humanity has ever seen. And it is not going to be easy. right? Especially when politicians don't even want to talk about it.
Thanks for sharing all your insights. So as an immigrant from Germany coming to the United States, I've always been very fascinated by the American Revolution, which was a time when the founding fathers reimagined the world and built a new world on top of the existing world. When I look at the world right now, I don't see any country except Elon Musk's attempt to go to Mars. So I was wondering, where do you see any basis for a new political operating system?
Yes, I'll suggest absolutely. In fact, we have a lot of conversations with governments and think tanks and other groups that know something has to change. I'll just suggest there's this thing called liquid democracy or dynamic democracy, which is one example of ways to leverage technology for better representation and more adaptable structure. Clearly, the system we have today is not optimal, right? It needs to adapt and evolve. We need to have some experiments running to do that. In places that it is working and experiments are running well that we're being involved in are sometimes the more hierarchical governments that can just say, this is what we're doing, or the smaller nations. We did an event in Uruguay, a very small 3 million person country in South America, for the president and all the heads of state and ministers. And in Uruguay, 5-year-old kids in public schools are learning how to code and program robots today. Public schools in Uruguay. All kids, every age, have computers at home and internet access in all of Uruguay. Where are they in 15 years relative to us in the US, right? So those experiments are happening in different places, but it's absolutely in places where the government can say, you know what, this is the vision, this is where we're going, and can do it. And it's right now, it's pretty dictatorial places or really small scales.
Well, you've presented a very positive picture of what the future will be or could be. To what degree in your classes or in your gatherings are you looking at the potential for a more negative scenario? And to what degree are the companies creating these new capabilities, the robots and AI tech, to what degree are they including some kind of fail-safe capability or security capability into these machines? Is anybody thinking about that, or they just see a rosy future ahead?
No, I think that the AI community in general is taking the potential downside risks seriously. There are a number of conferences just on that. There's an ethics committee at AAAI, which is the organization of record. There's a lot of activity going on. And at Singularity, we have workshops with all of our executive programs and our summer program just on the implications of AI and robotics. And we talk about what the downside risks are and what we can do to mitigate the downside risks and build more resilient systems.
Yeah.
Give us an example or two? What is the thing?
Yeah, for example, one of the things that people can do if they're building home care robots, for example, is rather than just deliver these robots into people's homes and hope for the best, they can use the eyes and ears of that robot to have humans back at the home office check in on these people and see how they're doing. So that's something that's very simple, but it may not be something that people do unless they think about what the potential downside risks are and what the potential liability is if their robot doesn't perform well. So we want people to envision what could go wrong and build more resilient processes and systems to avoid the downside risk.
And we have a whole track on policy, law, and ethics, which is where we have a lot of conversations around downside scenarios, how to even think about these problems that are really shaping the future of humanity, and who gets to decide, right? So there's a lot of conversations and activities. It would be nice if more people were discussing this publicly, because there are a lot of kind of scary scenarios. You will get a nice deep dose tomorrow of the dark side with Mark Goodman, so be prepared for that. So you'll get a little bit of a balance. In general, yes, we're very optimistic about the future, but absolutely, I'm pretty concerned about the next 30 years and some of the turmoil we're going to go through. And I think our role is to get more awareness to help minimize that transition period and make it go as smoothly as possible. Because we're going to have to go through it.
That just to add to that, that's why the technological developments we've seen in the last 2 years are tremendous, because AI has now become part of the zeitgeist. AI is now showing up routinely in the general media. There are TV shows, science fiction shows, entirely built around AI now. And I think this is a good thing. It's happening because the technological progress, the accelerating returns Kurzweil has been talking about for 20 years, is happening. It's really, we're in that accelerating curve. And suddenly people are taking notice of the great technological achievements that are occurring, like the Go championship, which really helped put AI on the map. These are good things because the public are getting engaged and starting to think about this. Of course, people immediately think Skynet, and of course, people here have been dealing with these questions for 20 years. But I think all of this is a great thing because we want more people involved. We want more people, the public, being involved in the discussion. Of course, everybody up here, nobody wants Skynet. It's ridiculous. Of course not. The point is, how do we prevent that, but still have the capabilities and the ability of AI to solve the big problems in the world? I hope you listened to the quantum computing discussions this morning. What quantum computing can do, not just predicting the weather, but putting people on Mars and solving the hardest problems of all time. If you're not excited about that, you're not listening carefully to what these people are saying here. So everyone here is aware of the dangers. Nobody wants Skynet at all, but we are seeing finally a lot of progress, and it's good for the public to be involved.
Great. Thank you. Down in front here.
This is a question for Ramez. I thought the presentation was obviously very interesting and shocking to see the curves, especially on the energy side. But what about the other side of the equation, specifically rare earth metals that you need for batteries or other commodities? Aren't we replacing one commodity with another? And then kind of the follow-up to that is, that also creates some, geopolitical issues potentially because of where those commodities exist today. So can you talk a little bit about that and how that factors into those calculations too?
Yeah. So we do, thank you. We do need things like rare earths for solar, lithium for batteries, and so on. There was a big scare 3 years ago. China said it might not export rare earths anymore. And then what happened was that rare earth mines started opening in Australia, in parts of South America. So there's actually an abundance of most of those materials. It's a limit of how many mines we've had. And if you look at sort of per watt of power in a solar cell, how many grams of rare earths do you need? That is going down and down and down. And there's designs in the drawing boards for things that are entirely carbon and silicon and no rare earths at all. So scarcity sort of drives innovation in those sectors, and I think we can get pretty far.
There's always asteroids as well.
Indeed.
Right, asteroid money, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, gentlemen, thank you very much for sharing your perspectives. Question for Marcos. So at what point will quantum computing become a viable and a scalable option for wealth management, for personal portfolio management or institutional portfolio management?
I would answer in two ways. From a mathematical perspective, it's something that is already viable, meaning that when you translate a problem into a cubal form, the form that a quantum computer can solve, it's something that you can already do now and achieve a tremendous speed up. Mm-hmm. That's not a matter of years or months, it's now. You can already achieve the speed up by converting a problem, a quadratic programming problem, into a cubal problem. Now, from a hardware perspective, there are already 2,000 qubit machines. These are very powerful machines. We have to learn better how to pose the problems in a very efficient way. But we are not talking about years. This is a technology that has evolved tremendously over the past couple of years.
Can I just follow up on that? You had a very interesting point that quantum computing was going to be able, or can crack the RSA encryption methodology. That, of course, is very alarming since it's the basis on which we send encryption. But quantum computing should be able to create new forms of encryption, should it not?
Yes.
You didn't get to that point. I think that's a very important point.
Yeah, I didn't get into that because it's something that people are working on. It is really no industrial scale RSA equivalent in the quantum computing world. So I guess that if, let's say in next year, there is a government that is able to crack RSA using a quantum computer, what I would expect is that most likely quantum computers would be temporarily banned, or they would need to be licensed, the same that guns or plane aircraft needs to be licensed. Right now, the answer is we are exposed, meaning that if a government now decides to invest heavily into quantum cryptography and they are successful, they will be able to access everything. There will be no secrets. They will be able to access absolutely everything because the paradigm the problem that RSA is providing to the quantum computer is a problem that a quantum computer can solve very, very easily.
Okay.
Great. I think we have time for one. Yeah, right. On that
That's really encouraging news.
No downsides.
Someone take us to a happy place here.
Thank you very much for sharing your perspectives. These talks were very enlightening. Technological problems that you talked about and that are being solved are immensely complex, yet I would argue that they are simple compared to social change and to changing the mindset. Would you think that perhaps changing the mindset, and Rob alluded to some limited experiments being run in smaller countries, but is that a project that somebody looking at systematically? Is there a project to figure out how to get the majority of the population to switch to abundance mindset?
Well, that's something we're I mean, that's the whole mission of Singularity University, really, is to bring a new mindset to the world around technology and ultimately to create a different vision for the future. We're very actively trying to figure out how to work with governments effectively. We've done a lot of programs for various agencies and governmental groups. Still today, many of them are like, I don't think this exponential thing is a real thing, right? Which is pretty alarming. But most of those people are going to be out of a job soon, and then the new millennials come online and they understand it in a different way, right? So I think it's just a time thing. Exponentials are here, and every day more people understand it and intuit it, and so I think it's just a matter of time that we'll see a radical shift. Honestly, the biggest one that's going to happen is if in 5 to 10 years everyone on the entire planet is connected, which, by the way, will be the first time in all of human history that everyone of our species was actually connected, right? This is big. This is big, people. This is going to be incredible. Something else can happen, right? And I don't know what the next steps are, but when people realize that that's the pace that we're on, it's undeniable, right? So governments are starting to realize it. If you have ideas, this is something I'm actively trying to figure out. We are working on sort of a future of governance event and series of activities. But absolutely, if you have ideas, please send them to me. I'm just rob@singularityU.org.
Great. Thank you all very much for your questions. Thank you so much for our speakers for participating. We're all going to exit the stage and let Bob take it away from here. So thank you.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.